we want to improve. We want to improve specifically in the area of our finances. This community was created to study finances, to study the scientific aspects of finances, and to apply the principles that would help us to win financially to our lives. Our slogan, make money, change lives. The way we are doing it is because we want to change lives. We want to change our own lives. We want to change the lives of those we love. And we want to change the lives of those in our communities. And that's why we are doing what we are doing. So, welcome to Level Up 2022. Now, just to reflect on what we did so far, this is now our 5th week. It's a 12-week program. We've done 4 weeks so far. We started off looking at the money mindset. What is your money mindset? And I want us to go back there because part of the transformational process of this program is to really understand how you think about money and why you think the way you do. And so we started out with that money mindset, and we started looking just a bit. We barely skimmed the surface in terms of the money mindset. But the main thing is that once you are aware of your money mindset, once you are aware of why you think the way you think about money, and then you're aware of how you want to think about it, or how you should be thinking about it, then you can make those gradual or immediate changes. So we started off with the money mindset, and that's important for us to keep in mind that there is a big difference between having a healthy money mindset and an unhealthy money mindset. There's a big difference between an abundance mindset and a poverty mindset. Understanding that culturally, a lot of things have happened to us that would have caused us to form habits because our mindset, really how we think, we act from our beliefs. So how we think and what we believe, it then forms our actions. So a lot of what we do relating to money and so on would have come from our mindsets. And that's why it's important to really understand that mindset. It is important to have that awareness of that mindset. So that's why we started with the money mindset. So after the money mindset, we then moved on and we looked at knowing your numbers. And we looked at knowing your numbers because the numbers part of money, we have not really been taught. We have not really been effectively taught in school how to understand numbers, how numbers work, how to grow numbers, and so on. So we looked at knowing your numbers. We looked at numbers in relation to how much money do I currently make? How much money do I currently owe in bills? How much debt do I have? How many people do I know? Knowing the numbers in different areas, knowing your numbers as far as your cash flow is concerned, understanding principles of multiplication. We looked at those things as it relates to knowing your numbers. It is important that we understand how numbers multiply. We looked at the fact that the difference between 1 and a million is just a series of zeros. So if we're going to go from 1 to 10, we're adding on 1 0. If we're going from 10 to 100, we're adding on 2. If we're going to 1,000, 3, and so on. And we realized that we went from that, just adding on that zero process until we got to the 7 figures, which would be the $1 million. So if we understand that everything basically is a multiplication by 10, so when we talk about leveling up, when we talk about leveling up in terms of money, when we talk about leveling up in terms of figures, even if you have $1 today, this program is for you. Because then what you would want to level up to, you would want to move from $1 to $10. If you have $10, then it's for you. You want to level up, you want to go from 10 to 100, and so on and so forth. So that's why it was important to know our numbers and to understand how numbers work, to understand how to really make the moves. We look at some spiritual concepts as it relates to, 1 can chase 1,000, 2 can put 10,000 to flight. What's the difference between 1,000 and 10,000, right? It's just another zero. So if you multiply 1,000 by 10, then you get to 10,000. So even financially, if we understand these principles, then we understand if you can make if you can make $1,000, then you once you understand the multiplication effect of 10, then it is easy to do 10,000 because you're just duplicating, you're just reproducing. I also shared some concepts as far as art is concerned, and I would have shared the fact that as a graphics artist, whenever an artist is drawing, if you see an artist produce a sky, or if an artist produce a landscape, let's say the landscape was just grass landscape, the artist is not going to produce every single blade of grass. The artist will produce one blade of grass or two or three, but in many cases we produce one blade of grass. We produce one blade of grass and then we duplicate that blade of grass to fill a complete pasture. So what we will do is use that same blade of grass and just change the color. So you might have it as a dark green, or you might have it as a lighter green. You might have some green mixed with brown where the grass is drying and so on. So understand that even in creation, when you look at things around you, you will notice that there is that multiplication effect, or there's that repeating of the process. If you look at patterns, you will notice that, a lot of patterns are really repetitions. It isn't that, as how we think that it's a lot of hard work. And no, if you really break it down, you would realize a lot of patterns are really repetitious. It's just repeating. Once you know how to do it once, you repeat it and you create that pattern. So similarly, we want to know how to handle our money, how to make money, how to save money, how to grow money. We want to know those principles, and once we can do it once, then it's a matter of just repeating that pattern, repeating that habit. So we looked at knowing your numbers, and last week you had some specific assignments to do where you had to you had to record, you had to write what you have to offer. Last week we looked at offerings, knowing your offerings. What is it that you have to offer to the marketplace? We talked about value, bringing value to the marketplace. We talked about the fact that as we are on the journey to leveling up, wherever we're at now, if we can first discover what is it that I have to offer, who am I, what are the skills, talents, experiences I had in the past, and so on. It can be, like I shared last week, it could be a good experience, it could be a bad experience. For example, you might have experienced divorce, and as simple as it is, what you would have learned from going through divorce, you can then take those lessons and teach them to somebody else. So I shared last week that what you have to offer doesn't necessarily have to come from a traditional place. It doesn't have to come from, sometimes we talk about the academic learning, and if you're traditionally stuck to this world's culture, some people will feel as though, oh, I have nothing to offer because I don't have a university degree. I don't have anything to offer because I don't have an associate's degree. I don't have any CXCs. I can't speak proper English, and so on. No, last week we looked at the fact that your offering can come based from a number of places. It can come from your experiences. You can simply take an experience that you've had, the things you've learned from that experience. You might have a passion for that particular experience. Like for me, my divorce forged my divorce in combination with my early childhood experiences of being adopted, being in a I don't want to say broken family, but being in a family where there were children from two different parents. what we now consider to be the blended family. I was in a family that really, in my opinion, did not really blend, because obviously my parents didn't have the skills that, the type of education and stuff that you have now on blended families, and how to do it, and how to take everybody out and let this person get to know the partner and this and all that. We didn't have that then. But coming out of those experiences, a passion would have been created in me for family, to do anything that's family related, to do anything that's relationship related. So your what you have to offer doesn't necessarily have to come from what you may consider a good place, yeah, for it to be effective. Because there are many people out there who may be struggling with the same experiences that you would have gone through, the same thing that would have brought you shame and pain. You can then determine, well, hey, I'm going to turn this pain into purpose. I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to help people who've gone through the same thing, or prevent people from going through this. Yeah. So what do you have to offer? Looking back, I would have given you the template for the online CV builder, and I asked you to build your CV differently. Build your CV listing your experiences. I would have been very detailed last week in listing mine, explaining mine, because I can tell you how I got to where I am. I can tell you, okay, this is connected to this. This is why this is important to me. And that's very important, because if you're going to do anything, and if you're going to do anything significant, if you're going to do anything that matters, then you must always know and remember your why. Your why is very important. So for me, the why I am doing it, even when it gets tough, even when, let's say, I might not have the resources, because I remember the why, because I remember, hey, I came from a family that wasn't blended. I still struggle with my biological brothers and sisters. I have non-biological sisters and brothers who are closer to me, who do more, who accept me more, who invest more in caring about me and loving me than even my biological brothers and sisters. And I'm not saying it in a way as to throw any blame or to put them out in a bad light. I'm just saying, I am also guilty of that, because they might be able to say the same thing about me, in that we, for one reason or another, we just did not blend. Therefore, it was extremely important for me to start my own family, to get married very early, to have children from one person, to work with those children in such a way that they would be very close, be very united. So people would often say, wait, wow, your children this, your children that. No, it was very, very intentional. And it came from the backdrop of the experiences that I had as a child. I could not, because of how painful that was, I could not afford to repeat that same cycle. So it might have meant, I guess my daughter might be able to share some of the things that I would have done to make sure that they, as brothers and sisters, were extremely close. When children would normally have sibling rivalry, they would quarrel and stuff like that. And one of the things I decided not to do was to get in between them to solve their problems, but rather teach them how to solve their problems, so that nobody feels that I am taking, this person's side over the other. They always understood, hello, you're one. At the end of the day, you have to separate the problem from you. So if this is what you're fighting over, let's figure out how to solve this, as opposed to, I hate you, I don't like you, I beating you, that kind of thing. So what you have to offer is important. And what I discussed last week as well is that, whereas we might have been taught that, we would hear things like, jack of all trades and master of none, right? So therefore, many people struggle and think, well, I can only do one thing. And I have to do one thing and do it well. And if I do anything else, then, I am not as good, or I'm not, stable or whatever. And that's not true. That's not true. Because when I went back to Genesis 1:28, I showed you Abraham, right? Who was a man chosen by God. This is biblical. This is not something that I created. Abraham, well, Genesis 1:28 is the command for us to increase and multiply. But also, Abraham said about God. He said, God has blessed me in all things. All things. And I think sometimes we kind of limit our interpretation of certain scriptures, and we kind of place ourselves in boxes that God did not intend us to be in. Abraham said, God has blessed me in all things. I mean, when I study that scripture and I look at the life of Abraham, you know, what we consider to be riches, what we consider to be, you know, significant, it's really nothing to God. When we look at is Genesis 24 verse 1, and we see Abraham's life. He was old, right? But Abraham was able to declare that God had blessed him in all things. When we look at Job's life and we see the amount of, you know, the wealth that Job had. And I want to speak about wealth. And I want to speak about wealth because I want to create a culture among us where we are comfortable talking about wealth. I am too often, because of what has happened to us, we have been pushed to a place where it is not okay to talk about wealth. If you have wealth, if you're wealthy, if you're doing well, if you know how to make a lot of money, if you have a lot of money, you're not supposed to tell anybody. You're supposed to hide it. You're supposed to walk on the thing. You can't have a good friend because that good friend don't just want you for your money. You've been forced to become something that is abnormal, in my opinion. And I'm saying, when we go through the Bible and we look at people like Job, I tell people, listen, Job lost everything. Everything. And this was a challenge that God, you know, kind of put Job in, right? Job gets set up in a sense. And Job got set up. And what I find very interesting is that even though Job lost everything, but the one thing he did not lose, which we, based on what is said to us in church a lot, and the kind of thought patterns that we are fed from religion, in terms of, you know, how we act and things we say and how God will treat us. The same person who said to Job, curse God and die, right? Who suggested, it was a suggestion, you know, it was how Siri and those guys do, and Alexis do suggestions. Well, she was doing a suggestion. She said that way, you don't curse God and die. And I find it very interesting that Job lost everything except that same wife. I would have thought she would have been the first to go, right? Job lost everything except her. And as a matter of fact, everything that he rebuilt, he was able to rebuild with her. As far as wealth was concerned and so on, she was there. So that says to me, you know what? Maybe how I think about wealth, and maybe how I think about how God thinks about wealth, maybe there's something skewed about that. Again, from a religious standpoint, we know a lot of things. We hear a lot. We take the scripture, the love of money is the root of all evil. Some people even forget to put in the love word. They say the money is the root of all evil, but it's the love of money is the root of all evil. And that too is often taken out of context, and we treat that as though it is saying that if we want money, or if we do things to work for money in an honest way, or to achieve a lot of money or whatever, then that simple desire or wanting is evil. And that was not the context of that scripture, because if we read that scripture properly, we will see that there was an issue in the church with Timothy, who was a young minister, who was a full-time minister. And what was happening was that a lot of the other supporting people, the ministers, were leaving the ministry, and they were going out to do secular work. And Timothy wrote to Paul to let Paul know what was happening in the church. And that was Paul's response to him, to say, well, look, the love of money is the root of all evil, because it wasn't a case of these people being grounded and doing the work of the Lord, which they committed to. It was a case of them leaving the work, abandoning the work, and going to do something else, and just leaving Timothy up in arms. That was the situation. So Paul was in essence saying to Timothy, look, you know, hold your ground. right? Stand faithful. Do what God has called you to do, right? God, there's a blessing in that commitment. Don't worry about them, because the fact that they are leaving and going after money, it is the root of all it, because they're going to be destroyed in the things that they're pursuing, because they've chosen. It was a matter of faithfulness. They've chosen to neglect what they were appointed to, because these were men who were appointed, and they've left that just like that. It's just like if you were appointed in the church as the usher or the treasurer or whatever, and somebody offered you a job, right? And you decide, oh yeah, you're taking that position. There's no resignation, there's no period, the month's notice, nothing like that. You just decide, boom, abandon ship, and you're gone and you're working. Just like that. So that's what happened to Timothy. And he wrote to Paul about the situation, and Paul then gave him a response. So that is where that scripture is. Then we talk about the poor. Okay, we look at the poor, and how the Bible speaks about the poor and so on. And when we think about, a lot of times we think that poverty, it means not having money. But the reality is, when we study the scriptures properly, we recognize that poverty really has nothing to do with money, but more so to do with our mentality, more so to do with our mindset. And there's also the scripture that says it is easier for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And the eye of the needle is a gate. The eye of a needle is not a needle like what we tread and sew clothes with. The eye of a needle is a gate in Israel that people would pass through to get to the temple. That's the eye of the needle. It's a very small passage, right? And I have videos and pictures that I can share, with you with that, because I was really amazed when I saw what the eye of the needle was. Now, the man who has riches, the man who has wealth, has to be careful in that you do not allow it to consume you to the point where you lose sense of the reason and the purpose for your wealth. And that's what the caution is about. But what I find has happened to us is that we've been impacted by these things to the point where we have accepted less than enough. We've accepted certain positions that, it is okay not to have money, or it's okay not to have enough. And what happens is that the pressure, the reverse side effects that come from that impact us, our loved ones, our communities so negatively that I think sometimes we don't even recognize that we have the solution to that. The same Bible says money is the answer for all things. The same Bible says that. The same Bible God says, I have given you the power to get wealth. The same Bible says, increase and multiply, dominate, rule the earth, rule different sectors and areas and so on. So I think that there is some level of disparity. There's that inequality between what the scriptures say and how we actually apply it, how we actually interpret it. So in these sessions, as we look at mindset, I want us to remember that, what we're striving for is balance. We want to strive for balance, and we want to be able to have impact, positive impact. We want to be able to leave good financial footprints, good financial legacies for our children and so on. So we must look at our mindset, we must look at our numbers and so on. And this evening, I wanted to look specifically at tripling our numbers, because that's where we're at. Tripling our numbers. Why is it important? Why triple our numbers? Now, before I get into tripling our numbers, well, I'm not seeing majority of the persons here. Some persons spoke to me during the week. I'm not seeing them on, but I know some of you would have tried to do the assignment. Sakura, were you able, did you get through with yours in terms of writing down what you have to offer? Sakura, can you hear me? Okay, I'm not sure if Sakura is hearing me. Talia, I know you had done yours in terms of what do you have to offer. Really identifying and cementing those things. It is important that you do that exercise before we go to the next stage. Bernard. Is anybody hearing me or?
Here.
Oh.
I'm here.
Oh, okay, just checking.
Yeah, this thing beat me up today again online.
Okay. Right. So were you able to document what you have to offer?
No.
No. Okay.
Yeah. Not yet, I will say.
Okay.
I had a rough week getting home.
Right, because you were traveling between last week and this week. Talia and I were having a conversation earlier when we started. Talia listed what she has to offer, and she said it was hard. She said it was hard to do. You know, sometimes being able to identify what we have to offer,
Right.
that's one of the areas we need help with. And then one of the other areas, and I think Talia had identified it, and Crystal had also spoken to me about it, in terms of being able to convert your experiences. Was that what you were saying, Crystal? Yeah. Okay, you want to share a bit about it in terms of. Right, you can come a bit closer. Right, Talia was talking about, you know, what I shared about your experiences and being able to pull your offerings from there. Crystal had said to me this is one of the things that she, you know, wanted to know how to do, and that I should create maybe a seminar on. Right, you want to share a bit about that, Crystal?
Yes, I wanted to know how to convert the different skills, experiences, and passions into income.
Right. Okay, so Crystal is saying she wanted to know how to convert skills, talents, experiences into income. Into income, right? And that's one of the things that Talia asked about as well. Good. So the first step is to identify them. That's the first thing. Identify them. Identify what they are. And then the strategies for converting them is simply you're going to use the same strategies as if you were dealing with a physical product. So let's say, for example, you look, once you identify them, you look at the raw materials. So I'm going to use this analogy. So if you had raw materials, let's say you had raw materials like flour, we had some coconut, we had some sugar, we had some raisins, we had some mixed peel, some essence, some spice. We have raw materials, and all those raw materials are separate raw materials. So as long as you're able to identify your skills, your talents, your experiences, and so on, you just list them. Just list them. Don't try to be organized yet. Just write them down. And I think this is one of the things that I think Judy was asking about. And I'm not seeing Judy in the link anymore. I'm not sure what happened. But this is one of the things that Judy was asking about, where she said, well, look, her sounds so disorganized. And at the first stage, you don't want to be organized. You're not aiming for organization yet. So just list them randomly. As you think about them, like I said, go as far back to your childhood as you possibly can, and list the experiences, list the talents, list the skills, list everything that you've been through, because you've picked up little things along the way, right? So once you list them, you're going to list them just as I listed those raw materials, and you're going to have them in, just like how you list them, you're going shopping for those things. They're randomly, they're in different locations in the supermarket and so on. But then you pick them up and you put them together in a basket. And when you put those things together in a basket, when I call those items, I am sure by me calling those items and calling them individually, but then you hearing them collectively, a picture comes to mind. What picture comes to your mind from the items I just called?
Coconut bread.
Coconut bread, right? Coconut bread. So the same thing is going to happen. When you list your things, then a picture is going to start forming from that list. It is similar to a puzzle. You buy a puzzle. The puzzle box has, the cover has the picture of the entire puzzle, so it's a big picture is on the cover. But when you open up that box, you see a lot of little different pieces, and at first glance you're like, what do I do? Where do I begin? Who belongs where? So the puzzle doesn't come organized. It comes in various pieces. So you identify those pieces, and then as you list them, a picture is going to begin to form. Now, as that picture is being formed, or to form that picture, part of the conversion process of taking those random things that you've done, or your skills and talents, the conversion process is to then look to see what goes together, what can complement what. Okay, you start thinking about things like, okay, so how did this benefit me? Is this something that somebody else will need? How could this have been delivered better to help me, right? So the different thoughts are going to come to mind as you start to list those. So you said coconut bread. So what are we going to do with the ingredients now to make the coconut bread?
Put them together, put them to cook.
We're going to combine them. And then we're going to use a process, as you said, to cook them. We're going to bake them. So you're combining, and then you're preparing it. So you're preparing it in a way that people can use it, right? You understand? There aren't very many people that enjoy eating raw flour, right? So you're going to do something to it to make it consumable. So you're going to do the same thing.